when you believe that nobody don't believe in you as a youngster, you start to lose that identity of who you're supposed to be or who you could be. And then you start saying, well, if we can be good for nothing, just let me be good for nothing then. So eventually you start even to lose grips of who you is as a human being.
Look, you have dark, good and have evil.
Because it's a different generation, it's a different kind of skill teach generation.
I saw a lot of things at, I would say, trauma.
In the heat of the moment, the adrenaline, I had so much things, I had so much to lose at that time.
Time to change, man. Time to turn around. Time to turn around.
My name is Zico John. I was born in Nelson Street. Some people may know as Wallerton Street. Go hand in hand. It doesn't really matter, but it was in the heart of the city. Nelson Street is known for a lot of the prostitution, the drug dealing, the gang violence. You know, like when it was coming up, it was very, very, very rare to see somebody go and work. I also joke and always say that I wanted to be a sanitation worker because that was the only person I actually see had a job. Everybody else was either slinging drugs, either he was a shopkeeper, he sold drugs, prostitution. So it was quite normal. And it was basically an everyday thing coming out of this scene, what was not normal. But it was very normal for me, which was normally not normal, I should say. So yeah, and that's basically where he was raised. So I saw a lot of violence. I saw a lot of drugs being slang. My mother tried her best to keep me away from that lifestyle, but I always say that your environment will always be a product of who you will be, or will contribute to some facts of who you will be, and it did for me for sure. It really did, especially going to school and interacting with some of the people within the community and what's not. Eventually start to rub off a little more on me. For then after school, you know, you may do a little shoplifting here, just get a little snack and whatever the case may be. There's little small little petty crimes in the beginning, you know, and it eventually grew for one for all for one, throughout my primary school years. And if one person get in a fight, we all got get in a fight because we all from the same neighborhood. So that's basically how it started. And then from there, somebody was like, "You want to try to smoke this here?" You see my father smoking this, we would carry it. Cause my father used to smoke marijuana. So what we would do, we would steal a little roaches and whatever the case he may probably have left around the house. And yeah, we eventually started smoking them, you know, smoking them, carry some cigarettes from our grandparents and stuff like that, and smoking it and stuff like that. So we got involved in some things that we shouldn't even be involved in. This was like even before the age of 7, you know, and we was doing these things. Whether it was stealing, smoking marijuana, smoking cigarettes, how you know, from school, whether it's after school or before school, and it just continued to grow from there. All right. So some people may even ask, like, so how we get involved in terms of the who he looked up to in terms, as you call, a drug boss, a kingpin, or in terms of his gangster life. Well, for me, the word gang wasn't even. I never even looked at it as a gang, or I never even looked at it as this person was a drug boss. As I say, it was pretty normal. So it basically was just families, or where you grew up, this is where you represent, and this is who you was gonna rep. This is where you come from. This is who you look up to. And most of the times you look up to the person who had some level of success. So whether it's a car, whether it's gold chains, whether it's image of looking successful, that was the person we looked up to. And majority of the times, the person who we looked up to was the person who was either selling the drugs or taking care of the community in that particular time. But when I was young, I never looked at anybody particularly to say, well, I wanted to be like that individual. I wanted to be like that particular person. Um, that happened a little bit when I got a little older into the secondary schools, when I was really having a grasp of understanding of how the drug and gang game really operated. In the beginning, it was just simple things like you just rap what part you come from, and you know, if one person fight, we all go fight. And it first started like that. And my cousin, who was had a lot of trouble with the law, from a young age, going in and out of doors, for different reasons, whether it was drugs, whether it was for guns, whatever the case may be, he was in and out of prison a lot. And I was young, so I really didn't have a grasp on how serious it was at that particular time. But he was the person I probably would have looked at and said, well, yeah, he was the first. Because he carried that stature of a boss. So he was the first person I would have probably had looked at. And there was a situation where I had got in a argument with my mom, and I had moved out, I had left, and this was in secondary school now, and I had left, and I had went in town to live with my father as well, and he was trying to show me the game. He was trying to show me the drug game. He was trying to show me like how he survived, and he just showed me the best he knew how. It wasn't that he wanted me to be like him, but he just thought, well, this is how he survived, and he want to show me how to survive too, you know. So he thought that this was the best thing he could do. So he carried me places. He showed me how he used to sell the drugs. He showed me how um basically how he was surviving. At the time I was very timid. I was a very timid young man at the time, very soft spoken. And the things that he was kind of exposing me to at the time was real shy. So he was like, yo, start with that shy thing. You come out to that whole shy thing, boy, and and toughen up, and the streets don't like no boy that's so soft, and you know what I mean? So he really kind of like try to pull that roughness and toughness out of me to like to be more adaptable into the streets itself, because still, yeah, my mother still tried to shelter me from it, but being with him I was kind of fully exposed to the true elements of the streets. So I would say was my first introduction, truly true introduction to the streets, or the streets politics, I would say. So yeah, I would say my troubles really began when I was entering into secondary school. So when I entered into secondary school, for first farmer, no, entering from primary school, transitioning to secondary school is kind of scary for a youngster. Hearing a lot of stories about secondary school, people taking away your money, or as you would call it, locking your money, and if you're tough, what can happen? So getting into secondary school is a real scary time, for a youngster. So when I was entering into secondary school, it was me and a whole group of guys that came from primary school into the secondary school together. And because of the stories that I heard about, if you don't stand up for yourself, this is what can happen to you, man, attack your things, and whatever the case may be. And I always had this mentality to attack with fear. So I remember my first week into secondary school, I attacked this guy. He took a basketball from me, and as soon as he took the basketball from me, he cuffed him in his face.
This is him at our wedding. He he was about I think he was about 5'6". See, that's his cousin. Yeah. But he was not a trouble. He was a really sweet boy when he was growing up. He was very, very sweet. But as I said, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I don't know if the school make him, because even when he was going to school, he used to get in a lot of fights, and I think that because he was short. He was short to me, so I don't know, because he was not as big as the other guys. They would always pick fights with him, and I just think that he got fed up with things. So you know what? I can start fighting. I can start beating you guys. But I don't know. Maybe that's why he turned. I don't know.
And there was a brawl out fight, whatever the case may be. I was scared, but I did it because I knew for a fact I had to let my presence be known. Because a couple hours even before that fight had happened, I had saw someone got an ear chop right off. And it was like, nah, this school's serious though, so I really gotta stand up for myself. So after creating that mentality rather than kill or be killed mentality, just say, well, you gotta stand up for myself, I gotta do what you gotta do. So I'd rather be the bully than be the person that to get bullied. So that's what it was for me. And then from there, before you know it, I got a lot of respect from the ones from the older farms above me, 4 farms, and the 5th farm started to respect me a little more. My reputation started to grow. I was in a fight every single day, basically. This was in school and even out of school. And when that started to grow, eventually we start forming like a clique, like some people would call it a gang, but at the time it wasn't really a gang. It was just a whole group of friends, and we can defend each other at all costs. So the more you get into this kind of stuff, shouting one of the after school, eventually starting to gradually turn into this culture what you all know as gangs. But really and truly, it was just a brotherhood at the time. And I was living with my father at the time. And there was this particular guy who had lived in the Orleans. He would come and shout me, and he would say, well, this is what he's do to get my school things. And he was going to rob people. He was going to do some other illegal activities. And he introduced me to this way he's do to survive. And in my head, it was like, yo, this fella always going to lay his shoes. This fella was going to lay his bikes. I would never think that this is what he was doing to get what he had to get. And at the time, I was kind of neglected. by my father. So he was hardly home, so I had to kind of fend for myself as well. So I found myself falling into those particular trends as well, whether it was to rob people, whether it was to do whatever it is we gotta do to survive. So I kind of get involved into to robberies and smaller petty crimes, going to buy some snacks and hustle at school. People showing you how to sell little drugs, a little 5 bag, a little 10 piece. Not major at the time, but I say it was very, very small and minuscule. So it wasn't nothing crazy. But eventually it grew even more and more and more, because the older you get, people start seeing you more as an asset to either their organization or their so-called gang at the time. And I had loved the violence. I ain't gonna lie about it. I had loved the violence. It was a real release, because what had happened was that I saw a lot of things that I would say trauma, but at the time I didn't know it was trauma. So the same cousin that I had looked up to, he had got killed. He got shot 5 times. Someone paid some people to kill him, which was only $1,000 in a pair of Timbs, and he was shot 5 times in the streets in Nelson Street.
This is my nephew that had passed away a couple of years just before he had gotten into that accident, the incident where he had gotten stabbed. Then I had to see him in the same hospital room like him. Yeah. They're so innocent and sweet, and they don't know what happened. I think they were so close. They were really, really close. There's two brothers and sister, but they're very, very close. Just so sad. I really didn't want to lose a nephew, and then I lose my nephew, then I lose my son. I don't want that.
That did something to me. That altered my mind, which super crazy. That like did something to me. And then after that, shortly after that, my best friend, at the time, he also got killed. Someone cracked up his head with a baseball bat. He got stabbed. Eventually, was in a coma. And at a young age, losing people that you love, are was so close to you, can really do something to your mind. And it did something to my mind, and it introduced me to the concept of death, and it made me feel that my time was going to come eventually. So rather than fear it, I kind of welcome it, and I was like, all right, if this is how we're gonna go, this is how we're going home. And I make sure I going home, and I taking people with me. So I eventually became more fearless, because I thought death can come my way as well. And I was doing any and everything at that time. I was actually wielding. And some people may wonder, so what your mother had to say at this time? Like, my mother had some kind of understanding, but she wasn't still yet fully aware. Like, she knew, well, yeah, we used to hang out with some fellas and, typical teenage kind of thing, but she wasn't fully aware how deep I was about to get into this particular thing.
I couldn't handle the fact that he would be out there, not knowing what he was doing. No, it was nothing constructive. And I really don't want to lose him. He was so sweet. And the thing about it, he was such the most obedient little boy ever. He was the most obedient. Like, just so many times, my mother take him to the supermarket and forgot him because he was so quiet. My mother would just say, stay there, don't move. My mother would come back home and she wouldn't have him. And she went back and he would still be there standing up waiting. He was so obedient. So I know that part of me that he wouldn't be in that kind of life for long, because that's not his character. I don't know what he was going through back then, but that was not his character to be like that, because he was such a sweet, sweet little boy.
Going to school, there was some wars, tongue versus country, school versus school, and eventually it turned to things like that, until eventually I was being blamed for things at school that I wasn't even aware of. And the principal at the time was accusing me of bringing gangs into the school, and never forget that. He accused me for bringing gangs into school, and I feel like I was being victimized at the time. I feel like I was just being victimized for a lot of things. Even when I wasn't had nothing to do with it, my name was still being called. So at the time, I kind of feel like I was being victimized. And when you believe that nobody don't believe in you as a youngster, you start to lose that identity of who you're supposed to be or who you could be. And then you start saying, well, if I can be good for nothing, just let me be good for nothing then. So eventually you start even to lose grips of who you is as a human being. You start to lose things such as love and kindness and compassion. Eventually you start seeing them as weak traits. You start seeing them as weak things, that character flaws within. To survive, you start seeing them as character flaws. So you start to discard them kind of emotions real quick. And this is how I understand that speaking into a person is very, very important, because the things that was being speaking to me wasn't good. Things that was being speaking to me was negative. The things that being speaking to me was they gonna be a criminal, they gonna die shortly, this was gonna happen, blah blah blah. And they started to believe it. Subconsciously started to believe it. And I was like, all right, if it's an animal, let me just be an animal. And I started to adopt it even more. And things really got even worse when we know coming on to our last year in secondary school now. People being at spell, XYZ started losing more friends either towards death or prison. But eventually when I had left school, this is where I eventually dive deep into the whole gang culture and gang life. This is where things really took a turn for the worse. So I had this reputation for being violent, this reputation for being fearless, this reputation for being done for whatever. I was ready. So I had that kind of reputation. So with that reputation comes fear, and with that fear comes enemies, and it comes with a whole, it comes with a whole lot. And I had a lot of enemies, but also having a lot of enemies, I had a lot of allies. And eventually there was this particular thing at the time called Bloods and Crips, which was imported from the States, which a lot of deportees had come back from the States into Barbados. And they started to indoctrinate and teach people like gang culture in terms of what Bloods and Crips all about and what it really stands for and what's not. It's a very organized gang. And when it first landed into Barbados, the Bloods was predominantly the biggest street gang that had. And it wasn't had nothing to do with a particular location. So it wasn't a one particular location where you could find this gang. The difference between the Bloods and the Crips was that it was no geographical location. It was spread all about. So you could live in St. Peter, you could live in St. Michael, you could live in St. Thomas, and all still be part of this one particular gang. They all just stand for the same code. The colors would have been red, would have been for the Bloods, and the colors would have been blue, which would have been for the Crips at the time. And it was a lot of Bloods, a lot of Bloods at the time. And it was like, what's going on here? This blood ting, and it was farming real fast, and it was real organized and stuff like that. And it comes down to the hand signals, the tagging of the walls and what's not. So I became curious. So what's this that we're really going on in Barbados? And they found out what it was all about. But for me, I was indoctrinated differently. I was indoctrinated where the Crips was concerned. And when I understood it, I studied this thing like a Bible. I studied the code. I studied how it was originated. I studied where it farmed, how it get here, what you had to do, how to get up in the ranks. And I was like, all right, cool, this is what you can do. And I loved it because it carried this family essence. It carried this family, especially if you lock down your personal life, you gonna want it even more. And it carried that togetherness in the beginning. Everybody looking up for one another. Everybody don't care where you come from, what you do, what you pass, what you look like. As long as this where you rapping, everybody was it was this unity. So eventually it became part of the Crips. And they grew through the ranks really, really fast by doing small little crimes and coming up through the ranks. And it became eventually one of the youngest Crip leaders within Barbados, which was called the OG at the time. So, and then eventually my gang was the Blue Street Crips, and we were one of the fastest growing Crip sets in Barbados. One of the fastest growing Crip sets in Barbados, and every single day was like a movie. Whether it was to be chilling or to the violent part of it. And for some people say, well, like, why would you want to live a lifestyle like that? The thing is that nobody don't necessarily set out to be bad. Some people got real good intentions, but a real bad approach. And especially if you're in govern or you're in taught, it can kind of confuse a person with other identity. Don't ever forget this. A person with other identity can never understand a purpose. Identity comes first, then purpose. So if you don't know your identity, trust me, you have no purpose, and you can just be doing in the world of things that you shouldn't be doing. And that's what happened. So I thought I was looking out for other youngsters just like me, people who had a hard upbringing, people who was abandoned by their parents, people who was just neglected by like. So I thought I was looking out for them. So I was gonna protect them at all costs, and that's what I started to do. And with that came a lot of problems. The police was looking for me, had enemies looking for me, and eventually found myself in a situation where I was stabbed 5 times. And stupid situation, this guy came up to me and asked me, you supposed to be Zico? You supposed to be a bad boy? And then like people asking me questions, like I got frustrated really quickly, and I was like, like whoop de whoop, you asked me a stupid question. Before you know it, altercation began. Um, I pulled out the weapon dropped on the ground. we started scuffling, fighting over the weapon, and he got the upper hand of the weapon and what's not. Then it was stopped 5 times. We rushed our way into the hospital emergency ward, and that was it. And then the funny thing about it, or I should say the most ironic thing about it, because it's not funny about this. I was in the same ward which my cousin had previously had passed when he was shot 5 times.
I get a call that he had gotten stabbed, and that because why it was so hard for me is because my nephew had gotten killed a couple of years before that. And then when I went to the hospital, he was in that same room where I saw my nephew. Like basically the same room, literally the same bed, whatever it was in that room. And I was so scared. I was like, don't tell me I'm gonna lose my son. Don't tell me I'm gonna lose my son. Don't tell me I'm gonna lose my son. I remember crying. I remember talking to him. He was on the bed, and I remember speaking to him like, you need to stop. If you this gang thing that you need to stop. You can dead.
We had saw the guy close up on my turf, and my eyes light up. Me and my guys like eyes light up. It was like, cool, we can get revenge. So we went, and I was like, get the strap. We went back. We went source a gun. The same time, we went back to the hood, strap up, come back out there. We didn't want to do what we had to do, but there was a lot of minors and a lot of young people and a lot of witnesses was present at the time, and it was at Sheraton Mall, and I really wanted to get my revenge for what this man had done. And the guys out there kind of like checking on, say, man, this ain't the time, Zico. You can't see, got a lot of people out here. But in my mind, they just saw a ton of vision. They just need to get my revenge.
Look, you have dark, and good and have evil.
Because there's a different generation, there's a different kind of skill teach generation.
I saw a lot of things at, I would say, trauma.
In the heat of the moment, the adrenaline, I had so much I had so much to lose at that time.
Time to change, man. Time to turn around. Time to turn around.